Wow. This guy's been around. John, hi. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, I've been up to no good for many, many years here.
And how have we never before this moment connected?
I don't know. I've listened to you for a very long time. But somehow it's never happened before.
It's just illogical.
I know many of the people that have been on your show. And, yeah, it's illogical that we haven't connected before.
Lauren Coleman called, got through, actually, just before you were to come on the air here. That wasn't a planned thing. He just got through. And I admitted to him, and I'm going to admit the same thing to you. All of these years that I've done the paranormal and things about the paranormal, I've traveled a lot of different paths, but the only thing I've known about Mothman was an occasional caller who would reference Mothman. And I'd always say, well, I don't know a lot about it. And your name would come up. And so anyway, here we are finally. What is Mothman?
Well, it all began about 35 years ago. So that's, in terms of generations, that's like 3 generations and by modern standards, you know. It's easy to forget it. Mothman appeared in West Virginia in 1966. And there were frequent appearances of this creature, which was described as being about 7 or 8 feet tall, which is pretty big.
Oh, yes.
And had very bright red eyes.
Bad.
And it would spread wings that were about 10 feet across. And it would take off straight up in the air. And it had a curious habit of chasing automobiles.
Straight up in the air. Now it didn't...
Like a helicopter, right. It did. You know, most birds have to do a running start.
Yeah, sure. Superman leap.
Yeah. And anyone who saw this was usually horrified and terrified and traumatized by it. And I, over a period of that year, I collected over 100 reports from people who seemed very sincere and very, very frightened by what had happened to them. This thing had sort of hypnotic powers that people would be transfixed when they saw it. And then the year climaxed with the collapse of a bridge with a lot of people on it.
What did that have to do with Mothman?
Well, it seemed to bring things to not to a stop, but everything slowed down. There were a lot of people on the bridge who had either encountered the Mothman or had close relatives who had encountered the Mothman.
This was geographically held to how small an area?
To it's the Ohio Valley. The Ohio River, you know, is the border between Ohio and West Virginia.
Right.
And a little town called Point Pleasant was right there where the bridge was. And it was a town of about 6,000 people.
And so the sightings were confined to this town or to an area around the town, or what?
To a large part of West Virginia.
Oh.
And there were sightings in Ohio, too. And there were curious sightings of what really looked like a really large bird, like, say, an ancient pterodactyl or something. So, meanwhile, the people in this town and all around it were having all kinds of paranormal manifestations, poltergeist activity. Okay? And I happened to be there almost by accident. And I had gone to Beckley, West Virginia, which is sort of a mining town then. I don't know what it is now.
What had taken you there? Why were you going there?
Because there was a boy there who had found a cat with wings.
A cat with wings?
Yes. And this cat was he named it Thomas, and it became a celebrity. And he charged 10 cents to look at this cat. So all of the people in the area were paying 10 cents to take a look at this winged cat.
Well, I'd sure pay 10 cents.
Yeah. Well, I went there. I did a story for a magazine. I think it was a magazine called Coronet, if You probably don't remember that.
I do remember that.
There were many general magazines at that time. Now there are very few general magazines. They're all specialized. But I was a freelance writer writing for all of these magazines. And I went there to track down the whole story on Thomas the winged cat, and his wings fell off.
They fell off?
Yeah. They were like lumps of gristle or something.
So they
and that ruined the kid's business.
Yeah, I'm sure that was the end of the 10 cents.
There was a lot more to the story. A woman in the neighborhood claimed that Thomas was her cat. And then when the wings fell off, she lost interest in it. She took the boy to court before the wings fell off.
The court case died on the vine as soon as
so there was quite a story there. And while I was in Beckley, I was having lunch with the editor of the newspaper in Beckley.
Right.
And the story came over the wire that 4 young people had seen this tall winged creature in Point Pleasant, outside of Point Pleasant, in an area that was known as the TNT area.
Before we even get any farther, can I ask you, how does one get a job doing what you did, being able to say, listen, editor, I'm on a plane for this winged cat. How do you get a job where you get to do those kind of stories?
I collected many other stories on each of these trips. And Playboy magazine had asked me to get to the bottom of the flying saucer mystery. At that time, there were flying saucer stories from all over the world, not just from Michigan or, localized stories. People were seeing them everywhere, and they were seeing them in the Ohio Valley.
Well, gee whiz, John, they're still seeing them in the Ohio Valley.
Yes.
And we still don't know what they are, so I take it you disappointed Mr. Hefner and couldn't get to the bottom of it.
I did not succeed in solving the mystery. But I traveled extensively around the United States, and I saw many of these things myself.
Well, I'm sorry the cat's wings fell off. That would have been very cool to have a winged cat.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting story, and it's in one of my books. Right now, offhand, I couldn't tell you which book, but anyway, I went to Point Pleasant expecting to stay there for a few hours.
Sure.
Interviewing these people.
Sure.
And I discovered that there were all sorts of things happening there. They were seeing UFOs. When I say UFOs, these were very, very bright lights.
Okay.
And they were going up and down the river, and everybody was seeing them. And nobody knew what they were. And very often they would be very, very low in the sky. They'd be like 100 feet above the water.
And in size, how big?
Well, they were mostly the size of a large beach ball. And extremely bright, and they would change colors sometimes. Just what we're hearing today, the same kind of thing.
Well, today, though, there's some recent, really interesting scientific literature about plasma balls. Now, these plasma balls apparently defy conventional physics in that they are able to maintain the energy that generates them and, in fact, even increase it while standing in the atmosphere. And so that's all I know, but I know that science has determined that, and they don't understand how it can be.
Well, they were talking about that in the 60s, the plasma balls.
Really?
And, you could say nothing is new, that everything that people are seeing today, they were seeing...
Has always been around?
Yes, and as you know, the history of this goes way back.
But actually being able to measure one, that is new. And being able to see it defy conventional physics, nothing after creation continues to get stronger. It gets weaker after the instant of creation, whatever would make this plasma ball. So it defies physics. That part's new.
Well, these things seem to have a basic intelligence to them. If you flashed a flashlight at them, they jump out of the way of the beam.
I've heard those stories, yes.
And also I would flash, say, 3 times, and they would flash back 3 times.
Oh.
And I did this in front of witnesses who signed affidavits to that effect.